Ladies and gentlemen, global warming is a term that somehow sounds both doomsdayish and distant. That yes, we know the planet is warming, but whatever its catastrophic consequences, it's not us, but future generations that will face it. If that is what you think, then pause for a moment and just look around you. There is a killer heat wave that is underway in India. There are fierce forest fires that are raging on in Canada that simply refuse to be doused. And a report released today is telling us that Himalayan glaciers that are the water source of 2 billion people in Asia are melting way more faster than all of us thought. Essentially, the impact of global warming is upon us. The summers are hotter, the winters are colder, storms and cyclones and droughts are more frequent and intense. The signs are all around us. In fact, scientists are telling us that there is a 66% chance that the planet will breach the key 1.5 degrees Celsius limit in the next 4 years. You know this, the 1.5 degree figure has become a symbol of global climate change negotiations. Hitting that threshold would mean the world is 1.5 degrees Celsius warmer than it was during the second half of the 19th century, before fossil fuel emissions from industrialization really began to ramp up. Question is that why India is seeing weather patterns go completely haywire? Till June end, beginning of July, the weather in North India was largely pleasant with rainfall. And now, in July, we are seeing intense heat waves that have killed over 100 people. The predictions are dire. Maximum temperatures will continue to burn northwest, central and east India for the next 4 to 5 days. And then they will abate. This is what the Met Department is saying. That's the graph up for you. The heat is currently on. 115 people have died. For the next 4 days, these heat wave conditions will continue in North India. Now, the death of 100 people has pushed the central government into a huddle today. Union Health Minister Dr Mandavia has held a high-level meeting and a 5-member team consisting senior officials from the Health Ministry and the IMD and the NDMA, while they've been mandated to visit states that are in the grips of a heat wave. Listen in to what Dr Mandavia has said today.
आज एक उच्च स्तरीय मीटिंग हुई जिसमें IMD के सीनियर ऑफिसर, नीति आयोग, डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट विभाग, हेल्थ विभाग के सीनियर ऑफिसर की मीटिंग में हमने 2-3 महत्वपूर्ण निर्णय किया है। आने वाले समर में हीट वेव में किसी का मृत्यु ना हो, इसलिए एक एडवाइजरी भी हमने डिक्लेयर किया था, सभी राज्य सरकार को भेजी थी और राज्य सरकार को उसके लिए सतर्क रहने के लिए भी कहा था।
Now, as large parts of India deal with the heat, there are 2 states that are seeing a flood-like situation develop: Assam and Rajasthan. Let's put those pictures out for you. Assam and Rajasthan. In Assam, in fact, let's start with Assam. There are incessant rainfall that has inundated several areas across 11 districts. It has impacted over 37,000 people. Most of the rivers in the state are overflowing above the danger mark. There are similar scenes in Rajasthan as well, that is dealing with the aftermath of cyclone Biparjoy. Parts of Rajasthan have been pounded by extremely heavy rainfall. As many as 7 people have died in different rail-related incidents. Over 15,000 people have been evacuated in the last 2 days. The Met Department is also predicting very heavy rainfall in the northeast in the next 2 days. Now, while the heat waves continue to badger large parts of the Indian subcontinent, Europe is heating up twice as fast as any other continent. The world's favorite summer holiday destination has now become the fastest warming continent in the world. Europe is warming twice as much as the global average since the 1980s. Most European countries have reported record-breaking heat waves which have claimed 16,000 lives and caused damages worth $2 billion last year. The temperatures in Western Europe have risen 2 degrees Celsius above average. In fact, the World Met Organization is now warning European countries to brace for more deadly heat waves. But the full fury of global warming is on display in Canada, where ferocious wildfires continue to burn. Canada is witnessing the worst wildfires in its history. Nearly 6 million hectares of land has turned into ashes. What's worse, the uncontrollable wildfire might last all summer. Out of the 416 active wildfires in Canada, 50% have been classified as out of control. Those pictures actually are not of areas where there is a wildfire on, but the smog that you see is because of the wildfire. Let's try and put out pictures of the wildfires itself. More than an ecological disaster, what is happening in Canada can also snowball into a humanitarian crisis, with some 200 homes destroyed so far and thousands of people displaced. Now, from intense heat waves and flash floods to rapid global warming, climate change is accelerating and nature's cry for survival is echoing all around us. The latest alarm bells have been set off from the world's highest peaks, the Hindu Kush and the Himalayan mountain ranges. As per a very startling report that is just out, the Himalayan glaciers melted 65 times faster, 65% faster between 2011 and 2020. Let me repeat that for you. According to this latest report, the Himalayan glaciers melted 65% faster between 2011 and 2020 compared to the previous decade. In fact, these glaciers are melting at such an unprecedented rate, the Himalayas could lose up to 75% of their volume by the end of this century. Let me give you a second to observe these pictures, but let me explain how this is important and why it should matter to you. Imagine having 75% of your Himalayan glaciers simply melt away. Glaciers in the Hindu Kush Himalaya region are a crucial water source for 2 billion people in Asia. These glaciers are the origin for at least 10 key river systems in Southeast Asia, from the Ganges and Indus to Mekong and Yellow rivers in East Asia. And it's not just India that's staring at a drinking water shortage and flash floods. Our neighboring countries will not be immune to the adverse effects of melting glaciers and rising sea levels as well. Snow peaks and glaciers are some of the most ecologically sensitive areas in the world that are worst affected by climate change. Glaciers at Mount Everest, for example, have lost 2,000 years of ice in just 30 years. 2,000 years of ice lost at Mount Everest in just 30 years. Dr. Jakob Friedrich is an author at the ICIMOD that has just concluded that study. He is joining us on the broadcast. Dr. Steiner, thank you very much. First question, we have always known that our glaciers are melting. What is the picture that is emerging from your study that you have just concluded? What is it that should have all of us very, very worried?
Thank you very much. That's absolutely correct. We knew before. I think the crucial part is twofold. First, in the last 1 or 2 decades, we have really seen how this melt or how this demise in ice in the Himalaya has further increased, right? The velocity on how these glaciers are going down is increasing. So this is quite worrying because previously we were talking about much slower rates. The other part is that we more and more realize what consequences this has for the downstream, right? Initially, it can have positive consequences as well. There is more water available, but we are expecting that rivers also in the Ganges Basin, for example, are going to carry less water from mid-century because of this ice disappearing. And this will have quite crucial consequences for the production of food, for the supply for hydropower, and economy and water supply in general.
What is the worst case scenario we are looking at according to your study, Dr. Steiner?
If we keep going the way we are doing at the moment globally, right, in terms of production of CO2 and the general rise of temperatures, we are facing a loss of 2/3 of all glaciers worldwide. Now, for the Himalaya, because you have to imagine that in the Himalaya, the glaciers are much bigger than elsewhere, the situation is a bit more hopeful. So in the Alps, for example, where I am from originally in Europe, even with the change of our behavior, there's very little we can do. If we change our behavior, there is still hope for the Himalaya, though. In the worst case, we will also lose 2/3 of all the ice mass by the end of the century in the mountain ranges in Asia. But there is a chance to turn this around and stop this from happening and limiting this demise of ice, and not let it come to the point that in the next century it will actually disappear.
Even if there is a behavior change, you're saying there is no hope for the Alps, but there is some hope for the Himalayas. What is it that needs to be done?
I think it's up to all of us, right? We as persons, individuals, we can think on how we live in terms of, how much we travel by air, which has a very high CO2 footprint, how much we travel by car, whether we switch to electric mobility. But the most important aspect is that governments are changing their behavior in how they are producing energy for a whole nation, right? That we are switching to energy productions that have a smaller carbon footprint. That would be wind, for example, solar energy, rather than banking on power generation that is based on carbon, like oil or coal. Because these are the big numbers if a whole country is changing the behavior.
Now, 1.5% is that key benchmark on which climate negotiations are based on. We all know that. But the fact is that whatever we do right now, even if we limit global warming between 1.5% and 2%, glaciers will continue to melt. Many people are saying that this is something that can simply not be stopped.
This is true. We have to some degree, we have to accept that we did so much damage already that some bad consequences are going to happen in any case, right? But we are looking at a situation where we can make it less worse. And we are looking at, as we are having at the moment, there's a big heat wave in the subcontinent as well, hitting a couple of countries in the region. This will get worse and worse. And I don't really think we want this to increase in future. So I think we can limit these extreme cases for the years to come. So and it makes a big difference whether we will have heat waves that are going to reach 50 degrees every monsoon in South India, for example, or in the Punjab, or this will only happen every other 10 years. So I think it's absolutely, even though we have to face some negative consequences, it's absolutely worth investing in a change of behavior for the future.
Dr. Steiner, my last question. It's often said, and rightly, that glaciers sustain life, they sustain civilization. Can you just help our viewers understand how it impacts them, how it impacts all of us who are watching this broadcast?
So it depends very much where you live. If you live very, very close to those glaciers, right? If you live in Uttarakhand, very close to high mountains, it impacts your agriculture, for example, directly, your food production, because the agriculture there for both animals and plants is very dependent on the water that is directly coming from these glaciers. We are sometimes even using meltwater directly to irrigate agriculture in these regions. We are also using it to produce electricity for the downstream regions, because many of the hydropower installations, many of the hydropower projects are in the high Himalayas. For the downstream, for people who live in Punjab, for example, it also matters, because what we are seeing is that in years where we have very little rainfall, in dry years, the glacier melt becomes relatively important, right? Because it covers, it balances out this lack of water from rainfall.
Dr. Steiner, we'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you very much. Your report on glaciers and the fact that glaciers are melting 65% more in the last decade than they did in the previous one, I think that is alarming.